To remove the back panel, undo the screws located around the outside of the back panel. Remove the screws around the outside until you get to the bottom. The screws along the bottom section are only loosened to prevent the panel from falling. Once the last screw is removed, grab the panel and lift upward, disengaging it from all the screws left along the bottom. The door switch is a simple plunger operation. When the door is open, the switch opens after the plunger moves forward. When the door is closed, plunger returns and pushes the switch to close it. To remove the door switch, remove the 2 screws that hold the bracket in. The assembly will fall loose and can be removed as a whole. To remove the motor, remove the ground wires located at the side of each motor. Then remove the 4 screws located around the outside of the motor housing. The door plunger is located along the perimeter of the door. It should be easily pressed, should not bind and not stick. If you need to remove the plunger, disconnect the door switch bracket as shown before. Once the bracket is loose, you can pull the entire plunger assembly out the front. To remove the door, open it fully, push the locks on each hinges forward. Once the locks are in place, grasp the door on both sides, lifting up, and as it hits the stops, continue to move forward and pull the door towards you. To reinstall the door, hold the door near vertical, put the hinges into the slots on the body, push in until you feel the notch catch. Lower the door, do not release it until you're sure that the hinges have caught. Lower the door fully, push both of the hinges back into the original position, and close the door. To adjust the buzzer volume, locate the buzzer port under the unit with a small flat-bladed screwdriver. Adjust the buzzer until the volume desired is achieved. You'll hear the notches. Those are individual settings where you can index the buzzer. To access the controls on a Moffat M-Series oven, undo the 2 screws under the control panel. Gently lower the control panel. You'll have access to the motor timers, relays, buzzers, timers, thermostat, and on-off switch. To work on it, place the control panel under the oven. It's a good safe place to put it to avoid damaging the wiring. To adjust the thermostat on an M-Series oven once the front panel is removed, locate the thermostat. Gently pull the thermostat away from the on-off switch and rotate it to access the front stem. To access the motor timers on Moffat M-Series ovens, remove the front panel, store it safely. You can now access the single or dual, depending on the model, motor timers for the oven. Although not necessary, removal of the door makes it easier to access all the components inside the cavity. To remove the lights, to access the lights, remove the racks first. Once all the racks are removed, remove the side rails, loosening the thumb screws on either side. Once both side rails have been removed, remove the thumb screw holding the baffle in place. Depending on model, there may be more than one. Remove the remaining thumb screws. and the baffle will tilt forward and out, exposing the lights and the motors. Once the baffle has been removed, locate the lights. Simply twist the cover off to expose the light. Careful that there's no sharp edges on the glass. With a clean, dry cloth, you can remove the light bulbs and install them the same way, taking care not to touch the halogen light bulbs to prevent early failure. Remove the nut and washers from the fan wheel. Reinstalling the nut till it's flush with the shaft. With the nut flush at the end of the shaft, install your puller, taking care to avoid damaging the shaft. If the wheel is hard to remove, you can use light heat to help remove the shaft from the wheel. Take care not to overheat the wheel or it will warp. Once the puller is in place, slow, steady pressure should remove the wheel. Once the wheel is moved, simple, easy pressure should remove it. To remove the door hinge, first remove the door glass for safety. Remove the 3 mounting screws for the door hinge. And slide the hinge out of its channel. The Moffat motor timer is a cam-operated mechanism. The riders of the cam can be located at the very back of the mechanism. The cam can be manually operated and can be simulated through its entire operational run. The 2 switches that operate the motor use the normally closed and common sections. Once located on the diagram, you can see where the common and normally closed are attached to the switch. To test continuity of the switches, put your meter on the common and normally closed and rotate the motor timer manually. To test the motor timer on a Moffat oven, remove the motor and capacitor from the circuit. Attach your meter to the common side and go to either normally closed section. Rotating the motor timer by hand. Rotating the motor timer by hand, you should be able to simulate operation of both sets of switches. The Moffat motor timer has 3 states: forward, reverse, and off. It will run in the forward direction for 90 seconds. There's a 15-second dwell or pause while it slows down the motor to go to the next state, which would be reverse. It will run in that state for 90 seconds, another 15-second dwell or pause, and then it will switch directions again. This can be tested very simply. To find the off position, rotate the timer until both of the riders are in the normally open position. This can be checked with a meter showing no continuity on either of the normally closed tabs. Rotating the timer manually until you hear the click will put it in either the forward or reverse direction. It does not matter what direction it is. In the forward direction, you can test this by finding the switch in the closed position and confirming that the other switch is in the open position. To confirm that the reverse direction is operating normally, rotate the switch until the next changeover. Once you hear the switch click, you should note that the one that had continuity previous no longer conducts, and the other one now shows a closed circuit. The two circuits cannot be energized at the same time. The motor would not be able to pick a direction to go and would overheat. To test the switch properly, you must disconnect the capacitor and the motor. If they're not disconnected, you'll read inaccurate settings regardless of the switch position. To adjust Moffat thermostats, it is sometimes necessary to disassemble them to the point where you can access the thermostat to adjust it. They may have different accessories at the front of them or attached to them in various ways. Simply unscrew the accessories that are on the front of the thermostat and remove them. Once all the screws have been removed, the accessories can simply be removed to access the thermostat. To access the thermostat on M-series Moffat ovens, remove the on-off switch that is attached to the front of it to access the adjustment screw. To adjust the thermostat, you need the collar, the thermostat adjustment tool. You do not need the thermostat adjustment tool to do this, although it makes it the easiest. To increase the set point of the Moffat oven, turn the thermostat shaft fully counterclockwise. Apply the thermostat adjustment tool, turning it counterclockwise as well, till the desired set point is reached. To decrease the set point temperature of the Moffat oven, turn the shaft of the thermostat fully clockwise, applying the thermostat adjustment tool, turning it clockwise as well. Adjustments of the calibration collar are very small. Once inserted, an adjustment of just 1 degree will change the thermostat setting by 2 degrees Fahrenheit. To remove the door glass on a Moffat E32 convection oven, open the door, lift the glass up, open it, remove the retaining screw, remove the set, lift the glass up and out. To remove the door on a Moffat E32 convection oven, open the door. The inner door glass can be removed for safety beforehand. With a 13mm wrench, remove the door hinge pin at the top of the unit. Supporting the door, remove the hinge pin, tilt the door up and out. To reverse the door on a Moffat E32 oven, as previously described, remove the door from the unit. Starting with the upper hinge, remove it from the unit. putting the screws right back into the same holes that you just removed them from. The next step is to remove the bottom hinge. And return the screws that were just removed to fill the holes. The opposite corner, remove the blind screws and install the hinge from the top of the door. Just snug it up, do not tighten it fully at this time. After removing the blind screws from the opposite corner, install the door hinge from the upper section. Do not tighten it down completely at this time. When you install the hinge on the upper portion, remove the washer, saving it to install on the lower hinge. Remove the blind screws. Again, installing them with the hinge, only snug. The final step on the door reversal portion at the unit is to remove the screw blocking off the catch, taking the washer with. Remove the catch from the opposite side of the unit. Once it's removed, make sure that you take the metal washer and the fiber washer with it, transferring those directly over to the other side. Do not tighten down fully until the door is back in place. Finish off this section by installing the screw to blank off the other side. To complete the door reversal process on the Moffat oven, move to the door now. You're going to exchange the hinges, the handles, and the other accessories. Start by removing the hinges. Placing them off to the side. The handles. Once the hinges and handles have been loosened, now remove the handle, spinning it and reversing it to the other side for installation. Again, rotate the door for access. Continue installing the hinges and the handle. Make sure all screws are tight before continuing on. Once the handle and hinge swap is complete, you now need to switch the door catch. Remove the blank off plate. Remove the catch. The catch does not have an orientation. Simply swap it over. and reinstall the screws as before. Don't tighten them down completely. Snug is fine for now. Install the blank off plate. Tighten all screws on this side. To swap the door glass from side to side, the door glass pins must be swapped. With the screwdriver, remove the pin from one side and install it in the other. Remove the plugs that block the opposite door glass holes and move them to the opposite side. To rehang the door on the unit, put the door on the lower pin with the washer in place, tilt up, install the top hinge pin, and swing the door closed. To finish the door reversal, you must align the door. Make sure that the door catch and pin line up appropriately. If it's too high or too low, the loose hinges will allow you to line it up. Make sure that the door aligns properly before tightening the hinges. Once the door pin and catch have been set, tighten down the 4 screws that hold down the hinge. Snug but not over tight. Assure that the door seals properly. The final part of door reversal is installing the door glass. Put the bushing on the bottom pin. The upper pin slides into the hole all the way in so that the lower hinge can be installed. The door glass lock is installed and screwed into the upper portion of the door glass. To test the forward and reverse of the motor, regardless of the operation of the computer, apply a jumper to your 230 volt input, which is the brown lead. The other lead can go into the forward direction, or it can go into the reverse direction. And you can manually operate the motor to assure its proper operation. To test the other components within the Moffat unit, the same method can be applied. Jumper your 230 volt in. With that, you can then run the cooling fan, the water injection, the lights, and the heat contactor. The encoders for time and temp can be removed by simply pulling the knob off, removing the 2 screws that hold the encoder in place, and removing the cable that attaches it to the main controller. To access the upper encoder, remove all the Molex plugs that control the unit. Remove the thermistor for temp control. Remove the cable for the external probe. Remove the nuts that hold the controller to the front panel. Once all the nuts have been removed from the front panel, disconnect the encoder. And remove the controller to expose the upper encoder. To test if one encoder is good, it can simply be swapped with the encoder at the other position. Disconnect the known good one. Simply move the cable from the one position to the other and test operation. To calibrate the Moffat oven, the D-series controller. Place your temperature probe inside the unit. For best results, use an accurate digital temp probe for best results. Place it in the center of the oven. Close the door. Start the unit heating. As the unit heats, monitor the actual temperature in your unit by pressing the Act Temp button. At the same time, monitoring your reference thermostat inside the oven. Allow the oven to cycle for 30 minutes before making any adjustments. Once the oven is stabilized at temperature, approximately 30 to 45 minutes, check your actual temperature, 325, and note the temperature that's actually in the cavity of 330. You have a 5-degree offset. Make note of that number. To change the offset, turn the unit off and enter the service programming mode by pressing the 2 opposing buttons. Enter the passcode of 321 for the service menu. Press the fan button to enter the programming mode. Use the timer button, scroll to P10, which is your cavity temperature offset, and increase or decrease it by the number noted before. Press the fan button. Flashing denotes the ability to change. Enter the offset required. Press the fan button to enter it. Press the on-off button to exit programming. To confirm your temperature settings, turn the unit on. Let it stabilize again. This time should only take about 10 minutes. Once done, press your actual temperature, and you should note an actual temperature that correlates to your red temperature inside the cavity. If you have difficulties with the moisture function of your oven, the first thing to do is to check the inlet screen of the water solenoid. Disconnect the main water hose after turning off the water. Remove the adapter fitting to expose the solenoid body. With a small screwdriver or pliers, pull the screen out of the valve body and rinse to remove debris. Install the screen after cleaning and reassemble the hoses as before. Oven lamp replacement on the E30 series models can be accomplished by opening the door and removing all the accessories inside the unit. Once the racks are gone, remove the left side rail. You can now access both the lights in the interior cavity. Remove the 4 screws that hold in the lamp glass cover, taking care not to damage the glass or the rubber seal. Exposing the light bulb. With an oil-free rag, remove the bulb and install in the same manner, taking care not to touch the lamp to prevent early failure. To remove and replace the door handle on a Moffat E30 series, open the door and access the latch cover. Remove the 2 screws holding it in. Next, remove the 3 screws holding the latch assembly in place. The ledge inside will prevent any screws from falling down into the door. Support the door handle as you take the last screw out and remove. To access the E33T Diagnostic and Troubleshooting section, turn the unit on. Under Settings, Service, enter the code 4600, enter. You'll now be in the Service section, which will allow you to monitor the events. Any service errors will be listed here. The error count, how many of each individual errors have occurred, and the diagnostics. Once in Diagnostics, you can individually control all the components simply by touching the window associated with that function. In the diagnostic window, you'll see a function and its associated status. To check the door, simply open the door and watch the status change. If the function has a true action, like the light, pressing the status window will change the status of the feature. Once the features have been checked, additional features may be accessed by scrolling down. The next screen will show you the remaining features of the unit. The additional features function like the light shown on the previous screen. Pressing the status window will start to operate the feature. You can see it function. You must turn it off to stop the feature. Be aware, while using the cavity heat though, the typical safeties do not apply and you can overheat the oven. To change the offset on either the cavity probe or the core temp probe, determine just how far off the probe is. Enter your service settings as shown previously. Use the arrows to scroll. Pick your temperature offset, which probe you intend to change. Enter the offset that you determined. Tell it OK. The cavity will now reference that same value. Individual functions are controlled by relays located at the bottom section of the side control panel. Individual relays can be tested using the diagnostics and a meter. Each individual relay can be operated and checked for operation. These are 24-volt DC relays. To replace the wrapper on a Moffat E31D series oven, remove the door as previously described in the door removal section. Next, remove the front panel as previously described, taking care to avoid damage to the wiring. You can tuck the wiring inside the cavity for safety. Next, rotate the unit, access the back panel, and remove the back panel screws as previously described. The next step is to remove the screws along the underside of the wrapper, along each of the edges. After removing the screws from the edge of the wrapper, Remove the last of the screws along the front, holding the wrapper in place. Once all the screws on the front panel have been removed, simply spreading the sides of the unit, lifting up and over. Installation of the new wrapper can now be accomplished, correcting any damage to panels and frame that isn't replaced with the new wrapper. To change the wrapper on a Moffat E20 series oven, remove the door first, as previously described in the door removal section. The next step will be to remove all the screws on the back panel. Leave the screws along the bottom loose, but do not remove. The panel will stay in place until removed. Next, remove the door switch mechanism from the wrapper, allowing it to hang loose inside the cavity. Remove the screws along the perimeter of the wrapper along the bottom. After removing all the screws from the side of the wrapper, access the front panel and remove the screws holding it in place. Once loose, be sure to support it to avoid damaging the wiring. Final step is to remove the remaining screws along the front of the cavity. As you take the final screws out, be aware the cavity will shift and move. Support it as best possible. A second set of hands is often helpful in this. Once the final screw is removed, carefully lower the cavity until it stops. Spreading the sides of the wrapper and removing from the unit. After the damage to the bottom plate of the unit has been repaired, reinstallation of the wrapper can be accomplished by letting the wrapper down over the cavity, resting it on top, and installing the two most rearward screws to assure the cavity stays in place. After installing the two rearward screws, assure that the vent is in close proximity to the hole, with one hand lifting the cavity up, install the two screws at the front of the cavity. After the second screw is in place, assure that the vent is in and seated properly. Install the two lower screws to assure that the cavity is in alignment. And the remainder of the installation of your new wrapper is the same as the deinstallation in reverse.